for many societies, but like just taking us here in this country, we're taught that it has to be binary. It has to only be one or the other. And so it's taken a lot of work, a lot of inner work, and also being willing to, I guess, stand up to those systems, and sometimes those systems are in your best friend. Sometimes those
Right.
systems are in your partner, your
Mhm.
husband, your mom, your dad. They're not just, and then there are systems that are even in you. It's not about, oh, it has to be one way or the other. It just tell me the truth. The truth is that I'm devastated and I'm also amazing.
Hello, my beautiful friends. Welcome back to The Healing Catalyst. I'm so grateful that you're here with me today. And if you're new here, welcome. I also want to say thank you to each of you for choosing to spend some of your time with me today and taking time to listen to something that could really help you live a better, more vibrant life. So let me ask you a question. Have you ever faced a challenge that's so big that it felt like it could redefine who you are? Maybe you've dealt with a difficult health diagnosis or a personal struggle that seemed to cast a shadow over your identity. How do you embrace that reality without letting it completely consume you? In today's conversation, I'm sitting down with my friend Nitika Chopra, the founder and CEO of Chronicon and the Chronicon Foundation, which is dedicated to empowering individuals with chronic illnesses. With a personal journey marked by psoriasis and psoriatic arthritis since childhood, Nitika turned her experiences into a force for change. Her entrepreneurial spirit led her to host her own TV show, Naturally Beautiful, and to go on to organize over 100 transformative events. She's also partnered with major brands like Google, Microsoft, and Bristol-Myers Squibb, where she continues to advocate for the chronic illness community. Nitika also had a more recent diagnosis of myasthenia gravis and has been on a profound journey of self-discovery since then. Together, we explore the delicate balance between accepting a chronic illness and not letting it define every part of you. The challenge of navigating what's often called the sick role, while still holding on to your multifaceted identity. In our conversation, Nitika opens up about her emotional journey, sharing how self-forgiveness, accepting help from others, and leaning into community and spirituality have been crucial to her healing process. We also dive into the idea of holding dual realities, recognizing the pain, but also allowing space for thriving, and how this contributes to an emotional resilience and ultimately to healing. This conversation also touches on themes from my new book, The Longevity Formula, where I talk about feeding the system, nurturing your soul through connection to self, to others, and to something greater. Nitika's story reminds us that healing isn't just about physical recovery. It's also about emotional and spiritual well-being, and how relationships and community can be vital sources of strength during our most difficult times. So, if you've ever felt overwhelmed by a diagnosis or a personal challenge, or you're seeking to better understand the intersection of chronic illness, emotional health, and healing, this episode is for you. I'm so excited to share this conversation with you. I'm Dr. Avanti, and this is The Healing Catalyst. Hi, I'm Dr. Avanti Kumar Singh. In over 20 years of practicing both Western medicine and Eastern healing traditions, the most important thing that I've learned is that healing is a journey we take together. So on this podcast, I'll be demystifying Ayurveda and other integrated medicine, showing how these simple, ancient practices are the keys to unlocking a healthy modern life. We are all healing catalysts because healing starts within. It starts with you, and it starts right now. This is a Soulfire production. Hello, Nitika. It is so great to see you.
It's so great to be with you, Avanti.
Yeah, it's been a while. I know we both had some challenging stuff going on last year. which is
Yeah.
actually one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you today.
Yeah. I'm so excited to have this conversation. I feel like it's kind of, it's overdue or it's right on time, one or the other, but it's,
Usually right on time, I think,
yeah.
um, so I'm trying to think of where we should start. I really want to ask you
Mhm.
whatever you want to share about sort of the challenge you went through. Most of my listeners know that I went through a pretty challenging breast cancer journey last year that kind of came out of nowhere,
Yeah.
sort of really, really pummeled me, had me on my knees, and I really had to sort of figure out how to move forward. And I know, you and I would text every now and then. You were going through your own challenges. Whatever you want to share, just to give everyone a little context about what we're going to be talking about. That'd be really
Yeah.
helpful.
Of course. Yeah. For me, my, I guess crisis time started in 2021, actually. Um, I had been like so many other folks out there, I'm immune compromised, and I had been very, very, very cautious about the pandemic and trying not to, even though I was vaccinated, I was still like really trying not to get COVID and all the things. And I ended up, my grandmother, my nanny mom, my mom's mom, I was very, very, very close to. She ended up passing away. She's, obviously a lot older. And I went to her funeral and I was wearing a mask and I was very cautious, as I said, and I ended up getting COVID. And I was the only one. So it was like one of those weird anomaly kind of things, like no one else got sick. And I got sick, and I think I must have gotten like the Delta variant or something really, really extreme. It was very intense. And this was also earlier in the pandemic, right? So it's like people were getting very, very sick.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me out for a couple of weeks. And it was scary. Like it was not an easy time. But I kind of thought I was like, then I was fine, and I woke up a month after getting better on Thanksgiving Day and I started noticing I couldn't see properly. And I had never experienced that in my life. So I was like, wait, something's wrong. Like, what? I don't even understand what's happening. I didn't even think it was like that big of a deal, to be honest, because I thought there must be something just off. And my brother happens to be, at the time, he was studying to be an ophthalmologist. He, now is officially an ophthalmologist. And so he gave me a little eye exam and saw that my eyes were not lining up correctly. And, fast forward, we sort of did a few tests, but things were pretty much coming back negative. Nothing really seemed that wrong. People were just saying, you probably have like a palsy or something that's like triggered by a virus. I'm sure it'll just pass. Not that that's an easy thing to have, but like those usually heal on their own and I'm sure you'll be fine. And that was, at the end of November of 2021. And then, about May 25th of 2022, I ended up getting a very specific test for something called myasthenia gravis. And I got that test because I had spent the months in between the first symptom to then. I stopped being able to smile. I stopped being able to eat. I stopped being able to talk properly. And and my vision was really impaired and I couldn't really function. Like I live in Brooklyn and just to go outside to like get a coffee or like meet a friend, I was disoriented to like a debilitating level. Um, and then, I got that test and I found out I did in fact have myasthenia gravis, which is a rare neuromuscular disease. And basically, what happens with that disease is your brain stops sending a message to the muscles in your body that it needs to move. So your muscles droop and they stop functioning.
Right.
And there's so many things I'm sure we'll talk about this whole experience. But one of the most wild and sort of catalytic parts of this experience is that the grandmother that passed also had this disease. And it's a
Mm.
very rare disease. It's not genetic.
Right.
And I basically got it at her funeral, you know? So
Mm.
I'm getting chills as I say that out loud. It definitely pushed me to figure some things out about my life. And it was a very hard journey. And I had to move home to be with my parents for about 6 months after that because I couldn't be alone and get on a lot of drugs. And it was really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can only imagine. Thank you for sharing that with us. I know it's really it's hard, and also, you're pretty open about this. You have also dealt with other chronic illness for most of your adult life, and so to be hit with another chronic illness is just. I can only imagine and sit here and sort of try and connect with how devastating that is and how hard that is to feel like, oh, I'm finally getting into my life and doing all these things that I've wanted to. I mean, you're such a successful, wonderful, incredible human being who has done all these amazing things. And then to get hit with something like this again is sort of like, wait, what's happening? Right. Um, and what I'm thinking about, what's coming up for me as you're saying this is that, I felt when I last year, and the only thing I can sort of, try to relate to your story is that when I found out about breast cancer and it came out of nowhere, I sort of was like, are you effing kidding me?
Yeah.
I've spent my whole life taking care of other people in my families or in all of my different roles in life as a daughter, as a mother, as a partner, as a sister, as a physician. And I'm like, and this is what happens? Like, I'm just starting to, do all this great work and getting out there. And I was sort of like, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
Yes, I do know.
Yeah. Like
I
I
do
just,
know.
yeah, if there's anyone who understands sort of what I was feeling, I know that you do. And so I can only imagine to have that happen a second or a third time. I don't even know how you were able to do what you've done. And that's really what I want to talk about is sort of this idea of like, how do you navigate through a chronic illness and what did you do? And we'll get there. But the first thing I want to talk about really is this idea of the sick role, because I think that for anyone who's dealing with a chronic illness, and I really was challenged with this, getting a breast cancer diagnosis and then the intensive treatment that I had to go through. The most difficult thing for me to wrap my brain around was, okay, now I'm going to be a patient and I don't want to assume this sick role. I was very aware of that. And, sort of the trauma of losing my hair, that was so tied to people seeing me as sick and then me going into that sick role because that's what people saw me as. How do you deal with the sick role? Like how was that something that came up for you?
Yeah. Oh, I love that we're starting there. And it's so interesting because, I talk about this every day, as you do too. And it's
Mhm.
also like, it makes me so emotional to talk about. And I'm just really present to that. And it's not because it's like negative. It's just like, it's just profound, honestly, like that we've experienced these things. But yeah, for me, the sick role, if you had asked me about that earlier in my diagnosis, my first diagnosis with psoriasis at the age of 10 and then psoriatic arthritis at 19, I would not have known that there was a sick role until I was honestly like in my early 30s. Even though I talked about it sometimes and like people had told me about it or whatever, it wasn't something that was alchemized within me or that was embodied at all. Like I was just sick.
Yeah.
And I will always admit, I was very comfortable being just sick.
Mhm.
I grew up in a home with a lot of love and support in a lot of ways, but emotionally, I've always been incredibly sensitive and incredibly
Mhm.
different than my entire family. And so there was a lot of friction growing up, and I felt all of it. And so when I got sick, I was cared for in a way that I felt someone finally gets me, you know? And that was incredibly intoxicating for a very long time, especially because I was so young and I didn't really know the other parts about me. Like,
Mhm.
I remember I got married when I was young and I got divorced in my mid 20s. And I remember after my divorce, I was very sick during
Mhm.
that time. And I remember just having this experience like, I don't actually know anything about myself other than the fact that I'm sick. And it was very true for me. Now it feels impossible to think of myself that way almost because I'm the opposite of that in a thousand ways. At the time I didn't know any better. So I was actually very aware of the sick role when I was dealing with myasthenia gravis. And I'm now in remission, which I'm so grateful for. But when I was living at home, it was interesting. I would say to my mom, I want you to want to know how I am, not because I'm sick. Do you know what I mean?
Mm,
Like I feel
yes.
like you're only I mean, my mom and I are like best friends, so she's the
Yes.
best. But like,
Sure.
there's just that part that I felt like people were only asking me, or like I was only seeing certain relatives or
Sure.
certain friends because
Mhm.
they were all like, hi, hi, like, this ladki, like she's really gone through all these things.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, where the hell have you been? I've also been like an entrepreneur trying to run a company, trying to do
Sure.
all these things, trying to date in Manhattan. I mean, come on. I'm
Mhm.
doing a lot of other things that have nothing to do with my health that are so challenging every single day. Like, why do you only show up this loving and this fully when I am this sick? And so it is intoxicating. And I had to really fight that when I was living at home, especially this recent time. So yeah, it comes up all the time. And I even think about that, with Chronicon, with my company. I want us to all be able to come together in a way that has a certain level of emotional safety because we all get something, like just how we started this conversation. You're like, you get a part of me that like most other people won't get, right?
Right. Mhm.
Because we have this shared experience in so many ways with our
Mhm.
bodies. But I don't want that to be what our lives are about.
Right.
Right? So I'm constantly trying to iterate around that and like own that there's nuance in that, and trying to push myself as a founder too, to be like, what are the ways that we can rise above that? And also like understand that like there has to be a point where we can come together initially. So
Yeah.
yeah, I appreciate that question a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot of nuance there. And I think, what's coming up for me is sort of this line. I don't know that it's a line, but it's sort of that, where is the line between embracing a diagnosis, right? And sort of being in that place of, what is it here to teach me, versus that very, very gray line. It's very easy to tip over into becoming the diagnosis. So I'll give you an example. I was extremely careful with my words. And this is because of one of my spiritual teachers that, taught me this. And I was very aware that, I am so much more than my body. And rather than saying I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I was very careful to always refer to it and say, when I was speaking about it, that my body was diagnosed with breast cancer, because I am so much more than this diagnosis, right? And so it's this really interesting place to be. And it was such a new experience for me in such a personal way. I mean, I could talk about it all the time as a physician, as a healthcare provider, as a facilitator of healing, right? I can tell other people about this, but to go through it in that way was life changing for me. And to really, really figure out, how do I not identify with this diagnosis and become the diagnosis while also embracing it. And so, even as you're talking about the sick role, there's this fine line, right? Because you want to allow people to care for you and to ask you how you are, and then also not go so far that that's all you are.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think, it starts with the fact that like as for many societies, but like just taking us here in this country, like we're not taught to hold all of that.
Right.
We're taught that it has to be binary. It has to only be one or the other. And that to me is like the greatest work of my lifetime, your lifetime, is like figuring out how do we have these expansive conversations where we get to say, no, I am devastated that this is happening. I am so devastated. I like could cry right now, even though I'm so much better now and all those things, but I can connect to that devastation instantly. And I'm also thriving at the same time, you know? And so it's taken a lot of work, a lot of inner work, and also being willing to, I guess, stand up to those systems, and sometimes those systems are in your best friend. Sometimes those
Right.
systems are in your partner, your
Mhm.
husband, your mom, your dad. They're not just, and then there are systems that are even in you, you
Oh, for
know,
sure.
for sure. And that's why, like, I have this new Substack called The Truth Today. And I think that's what we're really talking about. It's not about, oh, it has to be one way or the other. It just tell me the truth. The truth is that I'm devastated and I'm also amazing at the same time. you know?
Yeah, but and also, right? It's
Yeah.
it's holding
Yeah.
two truths together at the same
Yeah.
time. And it's a very difficult thing. Like you said, we live in a very binary world, especially in Western culture. It's so binary. It's this or that. You're sick or you're not. You have a symptom or you don't have a symptom, right? And this is something I spend a lot of time talking about with patients and students is that what is the symptom there for? What is it trying to say to you, right? Can we look at a symptom as not, I just want to get rid of it, which is a very Western medicine model
Mhm.
or approach. Let's get rid of it, right?
Yeah.
Rather than saying, what is it here to teach me, and how can I get that information, live with it, adjust with it, right? Because that's the truth is that most all symptoms don't go away completely until you deal with the stuff that's underneath.
Yeah.
That is just the
Also,
truth.
I think that's more of the binary too. Like there's a fine line there because, when people talk about what is this here to teach me and like what can I learn from this, I
Mhm.
have also felt that there can be harm in those
I
conversations, right?
agree.
Which I
Agree.
know you agree with.
Mhm.
And so being aware for both sides of it, I think is
Mhm.
so valuable. Like I know that my health is my greatest teacher. I know that for without a doubt. And at the same time, I don't have to like be excited about it.
Of course not.
You know what
No,
I
of course
mean?
not.
But sometimes there's like that kind of feeling like, oh, you gotta just, get up in the morning and know that you're here for a reason and it's here to teach you something. Yes, and I'm like pissed or I'm like angry. And it's like I don't think people talk again about those nuances enough. It's all of it.
Yeah, and it's not to be bypassing the pain that someone's in. I never want to be. And so, thank you for sort of, bringing that up and sort of, correcting me on that because you're right. You're absolutely right. Again, this is that nuance, right? Is that if you come at a symptom or whatever illness it is, only from the perspective of like, I just got to get rid of it. I just got to get rid of it. I just got to get rid of it,
Yeah.
right? I'm in pain. I'm in pain. I'm in pain. All valid things.
Yeah.
And if that's the only way you look at it, that can actually do a lot of harm to you also. Because
Mhm.
what if you can't get rid of it?
Yeah.
What if it won't go away?
Yeah.
Then what?
Yeah.
You're kind of screwed,
Yeah, you're
right?
totally screwed.
Right? And
Yes.
that's the nuance. And so that's where I was going with like,
Yeah.
can you sit in it and understand like, is there something bigger here? So again, it's the but and because I don't want you to be in either place of feeling like, oh my gosh, I have to fix it. Why is it here? And then you're bypassing the pain that you're in, the discomfort you're in, right? Both things.
Yeah. I think that's so important. And you know what's coming up for me as you're saying this is like, I know we're talking about health, but one of the other areas of my life that I'm always working on is my romantic relationships and also like relationships in general, honestly. Even friendships for a long time were really challenging for me. And I feel like I look at that as another area and sort of see how I can emulate the changes in both areas, in maybe different ways I can learn from how do changes in certain areas. So I'm just thinking about, my dating life recently and just how I have lived in an experience where I'm like, I just don't want it to be this way. I just want to be better at this. I just want to fix this. I just want to find somebody better. I just need to, and I think I'm having a little bit more success just very recently. And I do think it's because I'm just coming from a place of like really deep acceptance of like what has happened in my experiences and relationships, but also how I have been contributing to that and not being a victim. Even if I happen to meet someone who was like kind of terrible, it's like, okay, well, what is it about me that allowed that experience, that like brought that experience into my life, all those things. So I'm just thinking about, even if you're not dealing with a health crisis, like whoever's listening, I feel like there are these different ways in our lives overall that we can start to see, like, what are we allowing and what are the patterns that we're allowing, and not going into a blame conversation, right? But really from an empowering conversation, like an empowering place. And I find, if we're talking about truth, like knowledge and understanding and truth is so powerful. And
Right.
I do think at the end of the day, like no one can take that away from you, you
Yeah.
know? So
Yeah.
I think it's something that can be applied to a lot of different areas of life.
For sure. Well, and I always say this is that every aspect of life affects our health. They're not separate, right? That is very much an Ayurvedic principle point of view, is that everything in your life, it's not like you end up in the doctor's office because of X, Y, and Z, and those are the only things. I mean, you end up in a doctor's office because everything in your life is contributing to some symptom showing up,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's just what Ayurveda is, right?
Mhm.
So I think that's also what you're speaking to. One thing that was coming up for me, and I know we're going to totally go on a tangent, but that's okay, is I was thinking about forgiveness. And
Mm.
I'll tell you why.
Just gotta chill. Tell me everything.
Because forgiveness is a difficult concept for me and for many people, right? And it's always sort of thought of like this binary thing. You either forgive someone or you don't. Or, it's about, releasing yourself, from the bind that you have with a person and forgiving yourself and all these different ways of thinking about it. But I think what I'm thinking about as you're talking about the relationship piece is that it's not binary. And to say that you either forgive the person and move on, or that you are looking at it for yourself, there's got to be a but and. Like, you
Mhm.
can forgive someone and also say what you did was really shitty.
Mhm.
And I'm not going to forget it, but I'm also going to move on, right? It's sort of like you can have those two truths. And I feel like in anything, like forgiveness came up for me. That's the first thing I
Yeah.
thought of.
I've been thinking about forgiveness a lot lately, so maybe you telepathically realize that. I don't know, but I've been thinking about it. It's interesting what you're saying about, like, you can forgive someone but not forget. But I think something I've learned about forgiveness recently, I went through this really bad breakup over the summer, and like I just felt like I couldn't get myself out of it, like the pain of
Mhm.
it, and
Mhm.
I couldn't get over it the way that I know I'm capable of getting over things and through things.
Mhm.
And what came to me just even a couple weeks ago was realizing I didn't forgive myself for allowing, and
Mhm.
not that I, consciously allowed things, because I
Sure.
really do not believe that I did.
Right.
But I consider myself a smart person. I consider myself somebody who's really savvy, who understands people, right? Like I have a
Sure.
high appreciation for my ability and my intelligence. And I still ended up in this really unhealthy situation.
Yeah.
And so I actually have a much easier time, not even forgiving someone necessarily, but just being like, okay, I accept it. I accept that, like, this was shitty and like you were not great and like this is what happened. Forgiving myself, and even with health stuff, it comes up too, of like, oh, well, maybe I should have done it this way, or like, oh my gosh, well, maybe if I was a marathon runner like my brother, or like maybe, if I like to eat more kale, like I would be better at this, or whatever it might be. So it's really that. And I don't think that we talk about like self forgiveness enough. I think we talk a lot about the other person or the person across from you. And
Sure.
I really think that that self-forgiveness piece is like
Right.
extraordinarily huge.
Right. And also, not to go into the blame game of like all the things I did wrong that caused this person to behave this way or whatever. It's more about releasing yourself from, yeah, you know what? I probably contributed to that, or I did something, or I allowed it in some way. And that's okay that I did that. And it doesn't excuse what the other person did.
Exactly. Yeah, I really did my best, but it's like I don't always treat myself that way. Of course, if you called me and said, "I'm going through this thing and I feel so bad, my friend was mean and I did this," whatever it was, I would have so much compassion for you.
Sure.
And I would be like, oh my God, like, let's talk about it. You're so wonderful. Like, there's no
Right.
way you ever would have done this, like, on
Right.
purpose. And you did
Right.
your best. I'm talking to myself in the mirror. I'm so much harder on myself.
Of course.
And I even felt bad about that because I'm like, I teach people about self-love basically for a living, and I'm being so hard on
Hard on.
myself. But this is a lot of what I wrote about in my Substack and stuff this summer, especially because I was just like, wow, like there's so much shame that comes up because I am not able to be like as evolved in my relationship with myself as I wish I was,
Yeah. That's a hard one. I felt a lot of shame when my body was diagnosed with breast cancer, which is crazy because I'm dealing with a really intense situation. And here I am actually feeling shame and thinking, oh my God, everyone's going to be like, what the hell? You're the one who teaches everyone about integrative medicine and Ayurveda and natural healing and meditation and all these things and diet. And you got breast cancer and now you're choosing to go back to Western medicine. That was the big one that came up for me. And I
Mm.
really had to work through that quite a bit. And so, yeah, these are all these, sort of complicated emotions and issues that can come up with any illness, but I think with a chronic illness, especially, and with a diagnosis that is sort of devastating in that way, where you're like, wait, what just happened?
Yeah. Yeah. It's
It's
disorienting.
really, yeah, it's really, really disorienting. So I want to talk to you about relationships because you kind of started talking about that. Living with a chronic illness or being challenged with a chronic illness diagnosis, right? It can really feel very isolating. And I think that connection is such an important thing. That was a big lesson for me last year is connection and allowing other people to help me. That's something I've never really allowed people to do. And it was a huge, huge revelation to me, like huge. And I wrote about this actually in my book, The Longevity Formula, that's coming out. And how important connection is. How did you maintain a sense of connection to other people when you were going through this?
Yeah, I think you and I are very aligned in a lot of ways, like in terms of knowing how important connection and community is. And I know we're both like very close to our families and like they're just like at the center of our lives in so many ways. And I thought that I had kind of done this already because I had been chronically ill for so long. I kind of felt like, oh, I've already been through that. And like I already know, the ebbs and flows of relationships. But this particular time taught me some really hard lessons about friendship. And I ended up, kind of losing a couple of really significant friendships because I think my illness terrified them.
Mm,
And they really couldn't be with the fact that I was not okay because I'm
mhm.
pretty strong and people I
Yeah.
think depend on me to be pretty strong. But the good thing is that it also highlighted the few friends, not few, the handful of friends that I have that really wanted to be there for me. And like and I know those relationships like deepened tremendously. Um and so yeah, I think how I stayed connected to people, while I was going through this, I gave myself grace to not have to connect to everyone. I normally, I don't do this as much anymore, but I definitely used to always feel a sense of obligation around connecting with people. Oh my God, I have to show up for this person. I have to do this. I have to do that.
Right.
But it's just not, it was not, I didn't have the capacity, to
Sure.
do any have tos at the
Mhm.
time. So that was really helpful because then you also see where the chips fall. And
Yep.
some of my friends were like, dude, do not worry about it. Like, call me in a year if you have to. Like, it's
Yeah,
fine. Like, we are good,
for sure.
So that was really eye opening as well. So I think that was a huge part. And then, yeah, just giving myself a lot of grace and realizing, you know what? I don't need to keep up with appearances. I really just I want to be okay at the very least. And I want to be great in my life. And I want the people in my life who I care about to also be great and feel supported to be great, whatever that means for them. And whatever is going to come in the way of that, I'm good. Like, just, it's enough now, and maybe that's also like being middle-aged. Like, the fact that I'm 43 now and I feel like there's a shift definitely that's happened,
Mhm.
especially this year in particular, I think.
Right.
But yeah, community connection, it's life-changing. And it also comes with its ups and downs for sure.
For sure. For sure. Yeah, because it's also this fine line between wanting to be connected to people, but then people also wanting to help you and then figuring out how do you accept that help without feeling like you're moving into the sick role, like going back to what we were talking about before. That I found really tricky for me just because of the way I was thinking about it. I was so in my head about this whole sick role thing because I've learned about it as a physician, as a clinician, and then losing my hair. So I'll tell you about this. So
Mhm.
this was really, I didn't understand how significant that would be. When I started losing my hair after the second chemotherapy, and I hadn't cut my hair, I had long strands of hair coming out in clumps. I was devastated to a point that I did not anticipate. And I didn't realize how much of my own self identity was wrapped up in my hair because I was always known as the tall Indian girl with that really long, curly, wavy hair, like thick hair, right? And then also our South Asian culture, and you just add all of these different, Western perspectives of hair and all that kind of stuff, right? So I didn't realize how significant it would be for me. But when I really sat down and thought about it, what was the most distressing part is that now everyone else would see that my hair was gone. I was undergoing some kind of treatment, probably something for cancer, right? I've lost my hair. And then what do they put on me as being someone who's sick? I was so stressed out by that I actually avoided connecting with people. So this is actually, these are tied together for me in a very big way. And I had to find a way to navigate having connection with others in a way that was supportive of me, not just what they were doing, but how I was accepting their support, how I was viewing the connection. How do you perceive that? Like, that line of connecting with others, but from a place that is supportive of what you're going through, rather than putting you in a place where you don't want to be.
Hmm. No, it's such a big, beautiful, important question. I think what comes up for me when I hear that is I have actually experienced both sides of the spectrum in terms of visible and invisible conditions. And they've both taught me like so much. So when I was diagnosed with psoriasis within the first year, it developed and grew to be covering my entire body. I couldn't even get like an allergy test at a doctor because I didn't have any clear skin. It was extreme.
Wow.
And yeah, and so everyone knew. And
Right.
that was really where my identity
Mm-hmm.
shaped, it shaped my identity is what I'm trying to say. It shaped my
Right.
identity in a big way. And so if I met you, I would be like, "Hi, I'm Nitika, I have psoriasis." Like
Yeah.
it
Mm.
was just I wore it physically,
Right.
emotionally, all of the ways. And I did
Mm-hmm.
that for a very long time. And maybe it was a defense mechanism, maybe it was a way to comfort myself, maybe I don't know, but that was a huge thing. And people treated me very differently when I looked like that. I will never forget this experience I had when I was getting married. I got married in India and I was going through a really intense acupuncture treatment, and it kind of made everything a lot worse before it got better. And so my whole face was like almost like black with psoriasis. Like the scales were like so intense. I think the blood was rushing to the skin or something. It was just like so intense.
Right.
I always say like I looked like a monster. Like it was like intense to look at. It was really challenging to look at. So I would go and do all this shopping for my wedding. And people were like, who in the hell is marrying this girl? Like who, and Indians, we do not
Mm.
mince words. So like,
Right.
I would go to all these stores and they would be kind of like confused and
Sure.
visibly uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And I went through this treatment and then I ended up having clear skin by the time I had my wedding. And I went back to all of these stores. Oh, it like is so overwhelming to think about, but I went back to all of these stores and had a wildly different experience. Everybody talked to me differently. Everybody was raving about me. Everybody was like, "Oh my God." And it wasn't because I had fair skin. It was because they saw a totally different version of me. And
Mhm.
so I had those experiences from a very young age. So whenever I see somebody now, I try to see them as their full self and not
Yeah.
whatever I can see, physically. But I
Yeah.
say all that to say that, I had both sides of the experience. And even with myasthenia, like a lot of people didn't know that I was going through this thing that I was going through. So I think, having people show up for you and trying to have that connection without having it be like, oh, woe is me or poor me. I think because I had had chronic illnesses for so long, I really know what it takes for me to get my needs met.
Mhm.
And that I think is something a lot of people don't know. I didn't
For
realize
sure. I
I didn't realize that,
I had no idea.
but okay, see, that I didn't know that. I think
Yep.
because from a very young age, I've had to be like, if you invite me somewhere, I have
Right.
to assess, can I walk that far? Can I eat
Mhm.
anything? Whatever, right? I'm constantly
Yeah.
calculating in my head, which a lot of
Mhm.
people with chronic illness are.
Mhm.
I think it just made me really comfortable with saying, hey, Avanti, I want to meet you on Saturday, but I have a late meeting. And so, like, I need you to meet me at this location. It's too far from the subway. I can't, whatever it is, right? But most people don't do that. So I think that's like a long answer, but it's kind of the whole way of coloring that answer is just like I think there's a combination of all those things.
Yeah. So something came up for me when you were talking about the very different experience you had before your wedding of, going first with, a visible chronic illness versus not having a visible chronic illness and how you were treated differently. And you said something about they were connecting with two versions of you. And
Mhm.
this is what I want to talk about is
Yeah.
because I think that understanding of who you really are, right? Again, getting back to that idea of disconnecting from the I have breast cancer to my body has breast cancer,
Mhm.
right? That I am the soul, that I am so much bigger than this diagnosis, right?
Yeah.
That also comes from a lot of introspection and for me, connection with a higher power, something that's larger than myself. And I actually wrote about this. I hadn't planned on writing about this in the book, and then I did write about it and how healing in a chronic illness, a diagnosis can be a very spiritual journey if you're willing to go there. And I was willing to go there. And so it's also, I think when you want to accept help from people and not go into that sick role, it's also understanding who you are, that you are so much more than that diagnosis. So I think these are all connected, right? It's how you view yourself
Mhm.
and not just in this physical form, in this plane, in this world, but also do you see yourself as so much more
Yeah.
than this physical form?
I love that. I love that so much. I've had a very close relationship with God my whole life, and it's really been since I got sick. And my parents always joke, like, where did you come from? Because they are not like religious or like hyper spiritual or anything like that. But I always felt like, first of all, my body was so sensitive. I felt like I would pick up on messages and cues and things that just felt like more than you and I having this conversation. They were like beyond, right? And I didn't really understand what that was until much later in life. And then, second of all, I had to believe that there was something bigger than me out there because I know for a fact I would not have gotten through what I went through if I didn't believe that this was a catalyst, to use a word that you
Sure.
use so often, like
Mhm.
a catalyst to something that I was meant to experience for a reason that I won't know until I'm meant to know it, you
Mhm.
know?
Mhm.
And when I started Chronicon, it was kind of my first moment of being like, oh God, this is what you wanted me to do with all that illness? Like, this is
Mhm.
what? Like, and I still have questions for him. Like, I'm not
Yeah.
completely, I'm not
Yeah.
completely have it all
I'm
figured out, you know?
right there with you. Mhm.
Yeah, I still have some questions, but this chapter, so far is like, okay, like this is, and to tell you one quick story, one of the most profound moments of my life was, and I'll just never forget it. I was probably like 16, 17 years old, and I was having such a hard time in school. I don't like learn in a linear way. I'm not a typical Indian kid. Everything is not typical when it comes to me. And I was having a really hard time. And then that was causing a lot of friction at home. And I was just really like in this really profound like devastation. And then my body was like turning on me, right? So I remember this one day, I was just at the end of feeling like I could handle it. And I went into my closet in my bedroom and I just prayed. And I was like, I would never harm myself, but I was like, God, I need you to end this. Like, I'm not going to do it. So like, I need you to be like this. It's enough now. Like I'm
Mhm.
done. Like I need you to take me basically.
Right.
And I was hysterically crying. And the message that I heard back so clearly, Avanti, like immediately I heard, this is not about you.
Yeah.
And I heard that so many years ago, and I still get chills every time I think
I
about
have chills right
it.
now. I'm just like nearly in tears. Yep.
Yeah, it's not about you. And I was
Right.
so young. So I was like, excuse me, like, this
Like, huh?
feels really personal. And it
Mhm.
does not like the real life situation does not show me that this is not about me. Are you
Right.
kidding me? This is like, there's so much evidence to why this is all about me and I need to be
Mhm.
different and I'm not okay. And when I heard what I would like to call God say that, when I heard something so much greater than me say that, my whole life changed. It's not that it got easier. It's not that I never got upset. It's not that. But when I went through my divorce, when I went through myasthenia, when I went through all of these things, that has been my anchor throughout my entire life. When I am like, as a human being right now, God, I am devastated and I am heartbroken and I am angry that you think that I'm strong enough for this because I do not feel strong enough. And then I remember him saying to me very clearly, this is not about you.
Right.
And then I go and I lead a Chronicon workshop
Mhm.
and I do the Chronicon tour and I show up for a conversation like
Mhm.
this. And I'm like, oh
Mhm.
my God, I don't know what we're doing half the time. And I'm also like, this is it. This is it.
Right.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. It's why, so this chapter in the book is the last chapter in the book. And it's the last thing I write about in the book is this connection. And it's in the sort of the perspective or the frame of feeding the system, right? And so feeding your system, your mind, body, and spirit connection, connection to self, connection to others, connection to divine.
Mhm.
Because what I found is that actually more important than anything else I did. And yes, of course, the medical treatments were really important. But I feel that the reason I responded to those treatments the way I did was because of Ayurveda, but also because of this connection, right?
Mhm.
More important than anything else I did, drinking water in the morning, taking supplements, doing meditation, all these things, was this connection to myself, understanding that I am so much more than this physical body, connection to others, and understanding that the love that they were pouring into me would heal me. I'm going to get really emotional.
Yeah, it's okay.
And then connection to something larger than me, that like, this is why this is happening. It's not about you. That's exactly the message I got. It's not about you.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think it's so important, this idea of connection. And I know you talk about this so much and you have been for many years you and I did a talk. You were on this podcast 3-4 years ago, and we talked about self-love and compassion for self and how important that is in healing. And it's the same thing we're talking about now, right? This connection, I think, is so important. And so many of us forget how important it is for our healing journey because we are so programmed to think about what's the medication, what's the next thing I can do, what's the next surgery I can have, what's the next person I can go to help me, right? All important. And connection is so important.
I know. And what I just thought of when you were saying all of that, first of all, thank you for just being so open while you're interviewing me and just sharing all of that. I feel honored that I get to have this conversation with you. I really do. And what I was thinking about when you're just sharing that last part is just like, there's at least two parts of this process, which one is being responsible, which I feel like is what you're talking about, right? Like I had to get on meds. I had to make sure I went to the doctors, all of that. And then being open, I think, is the other part, like being open to receiving the love from those people, being open to receiving the guidance from something greater than you, being open to have things be different than how they seem, right? It's like both of those things are kind of in relationship to each other the entire time you're going through the process. And I do think you're right. Like a lot of times people can just focus on one or the other. Maybe some people are just focusing on the open part, but they're not focusing on being responsible or vice versa, So yeah.
And it's not to say that there's anything wrong with any of those things, right? That you're just going to come to the situation however you're going to come to it. You're sort of meeting that symptom, that illness where you are in life. I think what I was hoping that we were going to get to by having this conversation is to sort of open up the perspective that there is a but and also in all of these things. There's two truths that can always, and probably even more than two truths, that can be true at the same time and that you can hold both of them. And I just hope that everyone who's listening will really think about how can I perhaps maybe start to hold more than one thing to be true at the same time. On my healing journey.
I love that. That's beautiful. I think that's perfect.
Yeah. I feel like that's a good place for us to stop talking to each other.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, I'd love to talk to you forever, but I feel like that's really the crux of everything that we're talking about is just like being open to have that dance with your body, with your health, with your community. I think that's just what we're trying to do. And I don't think we're taught to do that. I think we are taught, like we started this conversation talking about the binary, and it has to be one way. It couldn't be further from the truth, actually. Yeah.
Nitika, thank you so much for doing this with me.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, anytime. I love you.
I love you too.
Thanks again for listening to The Healing Catalyst. If you love what you heard, please hit follow and pass it along to a friend. And if you're feeling really inspired, please rate and review so that others can find this podcast more easily. To learn more, head to avantikumarsingh.com. And to connect with me directly, find me on Instagram at avantikumarsingh. I'll be back next week and hope that you will be too. Until then, remember, with the right catalyst, you have the power to activate your own healing, because healing starts within.